lot of incredible things that surround that. So then by the time he says this thing, it's like, well, you said all these other things too. And so, and that's why, again, every one of those words I mentioned have the word self in front of it. Even in the definition, it says personal identity, which means person, right? And so, again, he had an ego the entire time, even when they talk about how he first got in and with Rockefeller and all the things that was happening then. It was, he had an ego then.
Right.
But all we knew of him, we heard the ego, but then he did Jesus Walk, and then he talked about a lot of things prior to whether he ended up being bipolar or whatever the things that maybe he was always bipolar, maybe he was better under his medicine at the time, but whatever things that happened later, he had the same ego as before. Maybe it got a little bigger because he had a little bit more credit, but people loved him with the first ego because
that's
the person that was surrounding that ego seemed like a different person. And then he started saying a bunch of ridiculous stuff to some people's opinion.
So when Julius told me what the topic was, I was just looking up some things, and I was reading something that was saying about how animals don't have egos. So
that would make sense.
And the things they do is simply innate in their nature, and it's something that does make us human, obviously, to have egos. So I say all that to say it's the source is the same for everyone. What you do with it and how we choose to view it is going to be based on the person and everything else. It's just really impossible to separate.
No, I feel you. But see what Classic said about Kanye having that ego from the gate. I agree. Everybody would agree, right? Around him, like he always had that.
But same thing that made him do the good made him do the bad.
Exactly. Yeah. So if we loved him then, why do we dislike him now, right? And he was the same person in 2000 and then 2004. And then when he went on stage, because you said the last 5 years. Well, last 5 years, it started going against.
I said 5-10 years. At first I said 10, then I said 5-10.
Okay, so 5 to 10, right? 5 years ago, the reason why you said 5, right? What Trump, about 4 years ago, right? So when he started getting his political views, we were like, okay. 10 years ago, on 2009, Taylor Swift little incident happened. That just pissed everybody off, right? But he also did that 3 years before, when he did the when he made the song
George Bush.
Okay, George Bush. That's as well.
I was gonna go with that one.
Remember the song when he was he jumped over the Grand Canyon.
Motorcycle.
Yeah.
Motorcycle song.
Yeah.
Touch the Sky.
With his wife now. Wasn't
Bound to.
I mean,
the Touch the Sky joint. He went on stage and was like, this was $1 million song, $1 million video. People still fooled with him back then. So the ego that he has now is exactly the same ego that he had when he was 5.
But he's not the same. So that's when you're asking, like, why do people feel a different way? When you're asking why people feel a different way, some of the things you mentioned are what started slowly taking people out of that loop. So the Kanye everybody thought they knew, first of all, we got to also keep in mind that when he came on board, there was a such thing as social media to a certain degree. You might have had MySpace back then or something like that. But it wasn't on the platform wasn't as big as it is now. So we only knew the amount that we saw then. And if you went way back to Muhammad Ali, obviously there would be less we knew about him during that time. So all we got is the visuals and whatever they're showing us. So that's why when we say 5 to 10 years and we go back 10 years, if you go back before that, well, you did have, again, he was cocky and all of that, but he was doing Jesus walks. He was saying Bush don't like black people. He was saying a different thing. Then we got to seeing like, and that was ego then. But then his ego started, potentially his ego, I don't know if that's what it was, or his sickness. But if it is his ego, then his ego started causing him to say some things that wasn't so cool and do some things. Like, I didn't even know who Tyler, what's her name?
Taylor
Whoever
Swift.
the chick,
You
Taylor
just
Swift was.
say or his sickness.
I'm just saying, when he did that to her, it was an embarrassing thing to some of us. Even if she didn't deserve it, even if
though.
Beyonce
I,
should have
I
got it,
think
it was an embarrassing thing. And then he stayed on that path of doing things that seemed more for, which is it's just good business. You know, people do this, which seem more for attention and or PR. Like he started learning how to work social media. He's one of the best at it. And so I give him that. That's a skill. But depending on how you do that, can affect how someone feels. His ego could be the same all
Right.
that time, but
You're
he's not the same.
personalizing because you keep saying how people feel.
All right,
That didn't change. So
let me.
he was the same from then to now, but people's feelings change. So again, you're personalizing somebody. It's either that thing or it's not.
But that's what I'm trying to tell you is when you're saying ego, again, if you look up the word, even when Henoch said about animals and the difference is animals don't have animals don't have an ego. Well, because what separates us from animals is having consciousness. And consciousness, if you look up all the definitions of ego, has to do with ego. It's going to be in one of the definitions in there every time.
Um,
Consciousness is going to be in there and self-related things that are related to self. And so I don't know how we can separate ego from a person's self if part of having if part of what an ego is self-esteem, self-importance, self-worth, self-respect, and self-conceit. How do we just take self out of all that? Then it's not the word ego anymore.
Eric,
Yeah, just to Julius's point a little bit. When we look at the past Kanye, in his older records, he was still arrogant, but the difference in how he spoke about it was there was a like my arrogance may not be right type of feel to his lyrics, right? He would say, I do this, we all do this. Sometimes I do this, we all do this. And and he would be inclusive inside of all of us having these certain defects in our character. And so you would say, I have these defects in my character because sometimes, I like to be about the jewelry, or sometimes I like to be about the limelight. And but he would do it in a way where it was like, this is who I am. I'm acknowledging it, but I'm not necessarily praising that part of me. And we all got to recognize that's a part of us. Versus when he begins to live inside of it. And so now there's no more apology for the way that I feel. Right? So now I'm like, yeah, I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this, but I'm not following it up with we all do this and maybe this is not the best way to be. He just in it. And so now to me it's like it is like Julia says, I do feel like it was the same it was the same arrogance almost in it, or ego for the words that you guys are using then that it is now. But now there's just no apology for it. I'm just living in this because I know that I'm great and I want to be recognized as great. And I believe there's an episode that you have in your archives when you talked about heroes, and there was a conversation off of whether somebody should acknowledge their heroism. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's one of them things where now he's acknowledging his heroism. So now does that take away from the fact that he has done some heroic things?
And
I don't
I
know.
seem to recall in that episode that some
You
of
and I
us
was going back and forth in that, yeah.
right, because I remember one of the things that was said was that if you acknowledge your heroism, then you're to some degree. I'm just kind of paraphrasing. And listeners, please go back and you'll hear definitely some good argument about what it takes and requires to be a hero. But certainly, yeah, I think that there was something that was said even back then that was like if you acknowledge your heroism, then you're not a hero.
It takes
Something
away
to
from
that
your
extent.
hero. It takes
It
away
takes
from it.
away. So
Not
now
yeah, it
what's
kind
the
of diminishes it. Yeah.
so then what's the difference here? First of all, egotism and arrogance run hand in hand. And so I'm wondering what's the difference now if he was just as egotistic in the beginning as he is now, and now he's just owning his egotism. Similarly, when we said if somebody's owning their heroism, and that makes them less of a hero, well, in this case, what that makes him what? Well, I mean, or how do you? What are your thoughts when you hear that?
I don't think his ego ever changed. It's the same
There you go.
ego. He changed.
Right, and that. But
So
if we say he changed, it seems like, and Julius, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It seems like you're saying if we say he changed, that's not fair because we're not talking about him, the self, the person. We're talking about this,
what?
right?
No,
What did you say? And because
so,
yeah, right.
basically, like I said, I don't think his ego changed because it's the same thing that made him make those songs that we love and say the things that we love. Also, make him say the things that we're like, nah, we don't rock with you on that. But his his circumstances changed, his environment changed, everything around him has changed. So he's embodied that change. You get what I'm saying? Now
Yeah.
he's more somewhat conservative and talking about Trump this, Trump that, but he lives in Calabasas and he's around that. So the ego never changed. Everything else around him and himself has changed.
Yeah.
So
See,
now we no longer like it.
you know the quote being that I'm glad you brought up that show about heroes. You remember the quote in Batman? He said, die and be a hero, or live long enough to see yourself become a
From the
villain."
villain. Mm-hmm.
Well, Kanye's the villain now.
Hmm.
Love that same ego that he had back then. So if we're all agreeing that
Mm.
the ego was the same thing then, well, he has now lived long enough. He kept that same ego.
Mm.
He just, if he was to die in 2009, people are like, yep, whoo, that Kanye, he was just so motivational. He just put all of his heart and all of his
Ha ha.
this. But he lived again a year. But he said the same thing in 2011 as he said in 04. He had the same thing in him. He just kept doing it. We wanted him to humble himself after a couple of years. We didn't want him to say, "Yeah, I'm the greatest." Dr. Dre, he don't say he the greatest. So he's kind of universally noted as one of the best people ever, right? One of the best producers. Kanye, Pharrell, he doesn't say I'm the best, but Kanye goes out and tell you like, what he's going to do, how he's going to change culture, how he's going to change music, all of these things, and he's successful. And he said a couple of years ago, "I'm gonna become a billionaire." Everybody was like, "Kanye, come on." Forbes just, I don't know how accurate Forbes is, but they just said that he's a billionaire. So all of the things that he has said that he's going to do, it's like, come on, bro. Because we want him to humiliate himself somewhat because we personally, we like humility. We as people, we like people who are humble, right? Like Jordan shot a free throw with his eyes closed. People will say that's very cocky. His ego is very high. But when Curry shoots a 50-footer, we be like, oh, that boy cold. That boy good at what he do. That boy good. But when Jordan shoot a 15-footer with his eyes closed, knowing his muscle memory, knowing that it's going to go win, we say that's cocky. He didn't have to do all that. He just didn't have to do it.
Do you think
I think it's because how you the perception of you of like you say Curry shoots a 50 a half court shot, a 3-point shot or whatever, half court or whatever. But Curry, and I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan. You know, I'm a real big Michael Jordan fan. But Curry's starting to do it now. But when Jordan came in the league as I'm going to take over this
Right.
boy, I'm going to be, and all that surround him made him the player that he was. Well, if you watch the documentary that's on ESPN right now about the Last Dance, about the whole Chicago Bulls, it's how his early season he would not pass the ball. He took over the game. That's why the triangle defense. Phil Jackson was put that in play. It was like, Jordan, you don't have to you don't have to be control of the ball. Bring your other players involved and let them help you win the game. It's not a I in team.
But it's an I and win.
let me ask you this.
It's a couple of eyes in situation and circumstance, which is part of the show you're on right now here at KCBZradio.com.
Let me ask you this. Do you think it got Kanye used everybody telling him you can't do this, you can't do that, you'll never be able to make it, blah 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 blah, as a way to power his ego and get there, right? So once he got there, everyone liked him. and he no longer had that drive. Maybe he's had to switch it up to get people to get that same fuel again, to light up his ego and get everyone's against him again, but for different reasons, to
Yeah.
continue to push. Maybe he needs the people to be against him or have that doubt in him to push him.
To
You know what I'm
boost
saying?
his ego, to make
Yeah,
him
to make
better
a
and
move.
make him bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he feeds off of that.
Yeah,
Maybe
he.
that's something
Well,
that drives him.
I agree.
That he climbs on the back of others or whatever to see, I'm gonna prove you wrong, or I'm gonna do this to say that it can be done. Like you said, he said that he's gonna be he's gonna be a billionaire. I don't know if he is one or not. I know Forbes magazine how they categorize
Yeah.
billionaires is by their network and all that other stuff. I haven't followed Kanye like that, but you know, um, I think Kanye gets a bad rap because the way he perceives his the way he acts sometimes. Like, yeah, he was acting that way before, but I don't think he was so social about it. Like now that, like you said, AJ, we got social media. Everything's more in your face now, where before it was, you're reading about it or you just, you see it here and there. But now it's just like bluntly in your face now, and it's like, come on, dude, like, are you for real? And then you would like a lot of black people don't like Donald Trump. You either
I
like
was
him or
gonna
you don't.
use that example.
A lot of black people don't. You know what I'm saying? Like, so when you get an icon like Kanye West talking about, I'm gonna support Donald Trump, it's like, wait a minute, dude. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you lose your mind? Like, and it puts you on the kind of fence of like, is this dude going crazy, or is he really going to be on the Republican side of things? Like, he's trying to brainwash people to become a Republican, and a lot of people are not. Black people are not Republicans. I'm not saying there aren't any black people that are not Republicans, because they are, but majority of black people are not Republicans unless you're in that high caliber of range of wealth. Most wealthy people are.
And
Now,
it actually was less to do with the Republican part of it, and from my perspective, it had less to do with the Republican part of it, and more to do with this man who is the Republican he's talking about. And
Yeah.
so when we talk about, you use a perfect example in Donald Trump. Donald Trump definitely has an ego.
For shizzle dizzle.
Okay, but but we don't like uh, we know the things that he said that have been oppressive against women and against LGBT community and against Hispanics and black and dot dot dot, that goes on and on and on. So what happens with Kanye is like, well, the same people who liked him since he's had his ego, which is what he's always had, are some of those people are not liking him because of his ego. They're not liking him because of his choice to support someone who doesn't like people who even looks like him or his wife or his kids or his butler and maid. Any of those people he deals with. This is a person who is publicly, Trump is a person who's publicly said he don't like that. So to me, it's less with ego and more to do with, that's where we go back to this person.
His views, would you say it'd be more so his views of thing of being supportive of Trump, or however you want to look at it? Would you say that, like, would you say, well, I don't like Kanye, or I'm giving Kanye a bad rap now because of his views of Trump, of all the
And
media that's behind, or whatever he's doing, or I don't like Kanye West because he's he's acting out in a certain way. It's like, I see people say, well, when you get money, you start acting out in a certain way. Like, he's just going beyond with certain things or whatever. Did he, when he first came in, was he that bad? That's what I mean. We don't really know how bad he is because there's the social media part of it.
You guys fool with James Brown? He was a lifelong Republican, right? Like, he endorsed Nixon.
Yeah.
Nobody cares though, right? Because we like him. We like James Brown. It's him, right? When we talk about Trump, talking about endorsing Trump, Kanye endorsing Trump, it's like, oh, Republican. Trump. We seen the things that he said.
But Nixon didn't have the same social media influence as a Donald Trump, where we all seen all the things he said.
No, because you brought up Trump and the foul things that he's done. But if you want to do the same thing, why do we all collectively like James Brown as a black community? But the person who he endorsed, he was a lifelong Republican. So it wasn't just Nixon. It was also.
But we don't.
Right? So the things that they have done to the detriment of black people, we didn't hold that against their heads because we like James Brown.
But you chose to use a person that you don't have any idea how many people knew the things that, like, I didn't know. Like, for instance, I'm a lot older than you, and I didn't even know that about James Brown.
Well, that's
a lot of people back then probably didn't know that about James Brown. Whereas we all know this about Kanye. We all know it about him. And I like, this is the thing, don't get it twisted. I don't even dislike Kanye. I just don't like that I just don't like some of the stuff he do. But I otherwise think he'd get a bad rap myself.
Oh, this is so good. This is so good. We got to get ready for Freedom Flow coming up shortly. Oh, y'all! If y'all tuned in, hey, look, I see all the listeners. I see everybody tuned in. Y'all make sure y'all back here next time because this show go down every time the same way. These brothers is phenomenal. So every time it go down like this, the brothers is phenomenal. I see y'all got the listeners, and y'all got listeners coming from everywhere, which is cool. I'm like, whoa, nice. Y'all doing your thing. But
and as always, we promise our listeners that we will continue to make beautiful mistakes. We embrace the opportunity afforded by our ancestors to speak. Whether right or wrong, weak or strong, we be learning humans working on liberation and scaffolding a meaningful and fair existence for all. Till next time, my netches. Uhuru.
Situation and circumstance. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. Can we see each other with only a glance?